Ladies and gentlemen, mainstream media has just hit a brand new all-time low. You see, just earlier today, while having a conversation with our Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CBS News host Margaret Brennan made the very bizarre claim that World War II was caused by free speech. And no, I'm not kidding. But now, before I show you guys the video, I need to give you all some background information. You see, just a couple days ago, our Vice President J.D. Vance gave a speech at the European Security Council in Germany. And it was during this speech that he expressed his concerns about the deteriorating conditions of free speech in Europe. In fact, take a look at this.
And expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor. If American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered.
All right, yeah, free speech is important and the people's voices need to be heard. In fact, that's pretty much the basic idea that this country was founded on. And I think that everyone here in America pretty much agrees with that sentiment. Well, everyone other than CBS's Margaret Brennan, at least. You see, Mrs. Brennan, who's probably still upset about her recent catastrophic interview with J.D. Vance from about a week ago, decided to scold Vice President Vance for his dangerous free speech ideals. And so on that note, take a look at this.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it.
You hear that? According to her, the Nazis weaponized free speech in order to kick off World War II and to carry out a genocide. Now, folks, I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I've read a lot of books about World War II, but I don't think that I've ever encountered that idea before. You see, between you and me, I don't really think that Adolf Hitler was exactly a free speech advocate, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. But okay, now I want you guys to take a look at Marco Rubio's complete and total takedown of Margaret Brennan's absolutely idiotic statement. Let it roll.
Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. Okay, the point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe, and that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about. And I think allies and friends and partners that have worked together now for 80 years should be able to speak frankly to one another in open forums without being offended, insulted, or upset. And I spoke to foreign ministers from multiple countries throughout Europe. Many of them probably didn't like the speech or didn't agree with it, but they were continuing to engage with us on all sorts of issues that unite us. So again, at the end of the day, I think that people give that is a forum in which you're supposed to be inviting people to give speeches, not basically a chorus where everyone is saying the exact same thing. That's not always going to be the case when it's a collection of democracies where leaders have the right and the privilege to speak their minds in forums such as these.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is how it's done. He just laid out the facts and completely destroyed her entire narrative. Now, folks, we have a lot more to talk about in today's video, but I want to say real quick, if you enjoy the daily news coverage, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton with my daily struggle against the dreaded YouTube algorithm. But okay, here's the deal. Most certainly, there has been an erosion of free speech across much of Europe. That is just undeniable. The reality is that not a single other country on this planet has free speech protected to the degree that we do here in the United States of America. Because what a lot of other countries have is free speech with a little asterisk next to it. They say, yeah, we've got free speech, but the government can fine you or imprison you for hate speech. Oh, and also, by the way, It's the government that gets to decide what constitutes hate speech. So really, when it comes down to it, what does that mean? It means there's no free speech. But okay, check this out. President Donald Trump actually weighed in on J.D. Vance's highly controversial speech about the importance of free speech. Take a look.
I tell you, you're talking about J.D.'s speech, right?
Yes, sir.
I heard his speech, and he talked about freedom of speech, and I think it's true in Europe. It's losing. They're losing their wonderful right of freedom of speech. I see it. I mean, I thought he made a very good speech, actually, a very brilliant speech. Yeah. Europe has to be careful. And he talked about immigration. And Europe has a big immigration problem. Just take a look at what's happened with crime. Take a look at what's happening in various parts of Europe. I thought his speech was very well received, actually. I've heard very good remarks.
And so, as usual, President Trump is 100% correct about all of this. In fact, as a little bit of added background information on all of this, over the last 10 years or so, Europe has taken in tens of millions of immigrants from Africa and the Middle East, and because of that, they've been experiencing a lot of problems, to say the least. It's actually, in a lot of ways, very similar to our immigration problem here in the US. But now here's the big problem, and really the fundamental difference between much of Europe and the United States of America. Over here in the United States, because of our First Amendment, we're all able to express our frustrations and grievances about illegal immigration. However, in much of Europe, that's not exactly the case. In fact, there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of examples of people speaking out against the European migrant crisis and then getting fined or even thrown in jail. And so that is what we're all talking about here. That sort of stuff is the problem, and that exactly is what J.D. Vance was talking about during his speech in Germany. But you know what? That's not even all of it, because in certain instances, European bureaucrats have actually tried to limit the freedom of expression of Americans living here in America. In fact, you know what? Take a look at this video from just a couple months ago.
I forget exactly which official it was within the European Union, but sent Elon this threatening letter that basically said, we're going to arrest you if you platform Donald Trump, who, by the way, is the likely next president of the United States. So what America should be saying is, oh, if NATO wants us to continue supporting them, and NATO wants us to continue to be a good participant in this military alliance, why don't you respect American values and respect free speech? Excuse me, it's insane that we would support a military alliance if that military alliance isn't going to be pro-free speech. I think we can do both, but we've got to say American power comes with certain strings attached. One of those is respect free speech, especially in our European allies. Like, look, I'm not going to go to some backwoods country and tell them how to live their lives, but European countries should theoretically share American values, especially about some very basic things like free speech.
And so you know what? Not only is he 100% and absolutely right on all of this, but I also personally think that it's a pretty basic request that we're making of Europe. Here in the Western world, freedom of speech ought to be important, and the government shouldn't be able to imprison you for saying something that they don't like. And so, hey, you know what, guys? This is just yet another reason why it's such a big deal that Trump is back in the White House. Because as they say, the United States is the leader of the free world. And yeah, we might have shirked that responsibility over the last couple years during the Biden era, but it's about time that we step back up to the plate and set the standard for everyone else. But folks, I think that's going to be a wrap for this video. Please go down below in the comments and let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video if you liked it. Like I said earlier, please consider subscribing because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and of course, as always, stay safe.